Hello. I wish to talk about one of the most remarkable Orthodox personalities of modern times. For most of her life, Saint Maria of Paris, as she's now known in the Church, was almost everything we would not expect in a saint. She was a kind of anti-saint, not in the sense of evil, but as someone who shatters preconceived images of what a saint should be. So, to go through her life, I will use a number of words to characterize different aspects, facets of what is really quite an astonishing life. Well, the first of these is bourgeois. The original talk of this was in French, so I keep the French word. She was born on the 8th of December, 1891, as Elizaveta Uranova Pilenko in Riga, Estonia. Her parents were Yuri and Sofia Pilenko. She was baptized. In fact, she almost drowned in the baptismal font, but the family was not particularly religious. Her father was a member of the lesser nobility, and he worked for the Russian imperial government. The family owned an estate and vineyard in Anapa on the Black Sea. In July 1906, her father, Yuri, died, and the family moved to St. Petersburg. The premature death of Lisa's father had a profound spiritual and emotional effect upon her. She could not believe that if God existed, he would have allowed her father to die. And she remained alienated from the Church for about 20 years. So the second word to characterize her that I want to use is intellectual. From 1906 to 1911, Lisa attended private schools for women in St. Petersburg. She received an excellent literary, artistic, and philosophical education for a woman of her time. She even followed some courses at the St. Petersburg Theological Academy based on professors' notes, because as a woman, she could not register or even attend the classes. The next word is wife. At just 18 years old, Lisa suddenly married Dmitry Kuzmin-Karavayev. This was in February 1910. Dmitry was a member of the Menshevik Social Democratic Party, which was a revolutionary party opposed to Lenin's Bolsheviks. She was also, at this time, developing her skills as a poet. She frequented the leading literary salons of St. Petersburg from 1908 to 1914 and knew all of the leading poets, the symbolist poets of the Silver Age of Russian letters. Between 1912 and 1916, she published 3 small books of poetry and poetic prose in a symbolist style. And in fact, she is known in Russian letters under her married name of Elizaveta Kuzmin-Karavayeva. And she remained a poet all her life. But, as sometimes happens, she broke with her husband, so she is a divorcee. At the beginning of 1913, Lisa separated from Dmitry, her husband, after only 3 years of marriage. She gave birth to a daughter called Gayana in Moscow, not in St. Petersburg, in October 1913. The fiction was maintained that Dmitry was Gayana's father, and even by Dmitry himself, but the timing doesn't quite work. And it's now thought that the father of the child, of Gayana, was an unknown man who quickly disappeared from Lisa's life. So now we're up to 1917, the revolution, which was preceded, of course, by World War I, beginning on the 1st of August, 1914. So there were really 2 Russian revolutions, not one. It's important to keep this in mind. The first revolution was in February 1917, and it was actually started by a march of Russian women on Women's Day in 1917. This was the beginning of the Russian Revolution. Lisa at that time joined the Socialist Revolutionary Party, which is also opposed to Lenin's Bolsheviks. So the main feature of the first Russian Revolution was actually the abdication of the Tsar, Nicholas II, and the fall of the monarchy. So this is a period of chaos in Russian politics. The Bolsheviks took power in the October Revolution, which we call the November Revolution because of the question of the calendar. And between 1918 and 1920, Russia was caught up in a civil war, which pitted the revolutionary Reds under Lenin and Trotsky against the counter-revolutionary Whites. Lisa became a politician in addition to being a member of the Socialist Revolutionary Party. She withdrew to the family estate in Anapa on the Black Sea, and in February 1918, she was elected deputy mayor and soon became the mayor of Anapa, the first woman mayor in Russia. But after a few months, she was forced out of office, caught in the struggles between the local revolutionaries and the anti-revolutionaries. Between April and October 1918, Lisa returned to Moscow, and she was politically active in the Socialist Revolutionary Party. Little is known about her activities during this period, but she seems to have been ordered to assassinate Trotsky, which she didn't carry out. Anapa was caught between the Reds and the Whites, and after a few months, Lisa returned to Anapa, which had been taken by then by the Whites. And in October 1918, she was arrested for collaboration with the Bolsheviks. She was put on trial in March 1919, but she got off with a light sentence, which she never served. A month later, in April 1919, she married Daniel Skoptsov, who was an official of the White administration then governing southern Russia. In 1920, the White Army of General Peter Wrangel, which was the main White Army operating in what is now Crimea and southern Russia, was defeated. And the Skoptsov family became refugees. They fled first to Tiflis in Georgia, and it's here that her first son, Yuri or George, was born. But when the Bolsheviks marched on Georgia, they fled to Constantinople, in Turkey, and then to Serbia. And her second daughter, Anastasia, was born in Serbia in December 1922. In January 1924, the family moved to Paris. So by then, Mother Maria, I prefer to call her that, was a real mother with 3 children. The family was poor. Daniel worked as a taxi driver, and Lisa did housework and made handicrafts to earn some money. In March 1926, the 3-year-old Anastasia fell sick and died of meningitis. And strangely enough, there's a long story to this, or why this happened. It was the death of her daughter Anastasia that led to her return to the church after this period of 20 years alienation after the death of her father. The following year, the Skoptsov separate, but they remained on good terms. And it was at this time that Lisa became a social activist, I think we would say today. She joined the executive of an organization called the Russian Student Christian Movement, ASER, from its French initials, as traveling secretary. And her responsibilities were to travel around France to meet and assist and console the poor and uprooted Russian immigrants found throughout France. After a few years of this, about 5 years of this, she decided to become a nun. This was in March 1932, with the name Mother Maria. So in order to satisfy canonical requirements, Lisa and Daniel obtained an ecclesiastical divorce, but they never had a legal divorce in the French legal system. Her ecclesial superior, Metropolitan of Logi, hoped that she would found a monastery. But this was not Mother Maria, to found a conventional monastery. Her monastery was the world, with the poor, the homeless, the abandoned women, the drunks, the mentally ill. Her patron is Saint Mary of Egypt. But her desert, Mother Maria's desert, is not Palestine, but the desert of the modern city. She became what we would call today, perhaps, a deaconess. In September 1932, shortly after taking the veil, becoming a nun, she founded a hostel for women, abandoned women, single women with children in Paris. And in August 1934, she founded a much larger hostel at 77 Rue de l'Urmel, and this is where she is most well associated with, is this Rue de l'Urmel hostel in the 15th arrondissement or sector of Paris. She had strong support from Metropolitan of Logi, from Father Sergius Bulgakov, who was her spiritual father, and from close friends such as the philosopher Nicholas Berdiaev and Father Lev Gillette, well known as a monk of the Eastern Church, author of several well-known books of Orthodox spirituality. To sustain her charitable, social, and cultural activities, she founded with her supporters Orthodox Action. She was a whirlwind of activity during this period, both in terms of her social assistance activities, but also culturally and intellectually. She continued to participate in the activities of the Russian student Christian movement. She was joined in her hostel by two other nuns, Mother Eudoxia and Mother Lubov, but they were seeking a more normal monastic life and couldn't keep up with Mother Maria, so they decided to leave and found a conventional monastery. In the meantime, her daughter Guyana returned to the Soviet Union, and she died in Leningrad in 1936 in somewhat suspicious circumstances. Mother Maria was devastated from the death of her daughter, and she locked herself in her room for 2 weeks and produced some quite remarkable poetry reflecting her reaction and feelings to the death of her second daughter. Throughout most of her life, in addition to being a poet, Mother Maria was also an artist. Both prior to her exile, and some of her artwork miraculously survived the entire communist period. That's a story in itself, because many of her works of art, which were mostly watercolors, had religious themes, even though this was the period of her revolt against God. She returned to artwork again during the 1930s, and most of her artwork during this period is religious. A variety of different artistic media, icons, frescoes, drawings, embroideries, liturgical vestments. There is even, again, another miraculous survival, an embroidery from her time in a German concentration camp. So in addition to all of these activities, she was also a theologian. And she wrote in the 1930s a number of articles on spiritual and theological subjects, and even several poetic plays on religious and social themes. Most important articles are translated in English in the book Mother Maria Essential Writings. 1st of September, 1939, beginning of World War II. On the 10th of October, Father Dmitry Klepenin, his wife Tamara, and their daughter Helena, soon to be joined by a son Paul, arrived at Lourmel, with Father Dmitry becoming the chaplain in the chapel at her mission. On the 14th of June 1940, the Germans occupied Paris. Mother Maria, Father Dmitry, and others in their entourage supported the resistance movement against the German occupiers, notably by assisting Jews to get false papers and to escape from German hands. In February 1943, the Gestapo arrested Mother Maria, Father Dmitry, her son Yuri Skoptsov, and others at Lourmel. In April 1943, she was deported to the Ravensbruck concentration camp for women in Germany. And the men from Lourmel were deported to Buchenwald concentration camp. Father Dmitry and Yuri, both of whom had rather delicate health, died in the harsh conditions in February 1944. Mother Maria was physically very strong, and she carried out a remarkable social and religious ministry in the concentration camp. This is retold by memoirs by camp survivors. She even produced, as I said, some artworks, including a remarkable charcoal drawing of the Mother of God holding a small crucified Christ as child. This has not survived, but there is a reproduction based on descriptions of survivors. But in the spring of 1945, Mother Maria's health faltered, and greatly weakened, she was selected for execution. On the 31st of March, 1945, which was Holy Saturday in the Western ecclesial calendar, Elizabeth Skoptsov, as she was still known from her civil name, matriculation number 19263, was gassed at Ravensbruck. After the war, her friends, led by Helena Klepenin, the daughter of Father Dmitry, mounted a campaign to have her canonized. And this bore fruit in January 2004, when the Holy Synod of the Ecumenical Patriarchate issued a decree of canonization, not only of Mother Maria, but also of Father Dmitry Klepenin, Elias Fundaminsky, who was a literary critic and friend of Mother Maria, and her son Yuri Skoptsov. They were all canonized as martyrs for the faith. So the glorification of the new martyrs took place in the St. Alexander Nevsky Cathedral in Paris. The icon for the glorification shows the 4 newly canonized saints in front of Christ on the cross. I'd like to terminate by referring to 2 books in English on Mother Maria. The first is a biography under the title Pearl of Great Price by Father Sergei Hackl. And the other, as I mentioned earlier, some of her most important writings under the title Mother Maria Essential Writings, edited by Jim Forrest. In one of her poems, Mother Maria writes, "All my forgotten notebooks, my articles, my poetry, throw them away. Don't think of keeping my old face in your hearts. I don't want to be a memory. I want to be a calling for you." Thank you.